Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Thank you. I have mostly thanks to say, and then some poems to read. Obviously to thank Anne for what she said and for what she pointed to. Thank you for coming tonight. Some of you from far away. I think some of you have just come from Paris, and at least some from New York. But also thank this place for being here for you to come to, and for sustaining me for all these years. Everyone seems to think 50 years is a long time. To be honest with you, it feels as if I just moved in. When I dream, I still am dreaming in New York, in Brooklyn, where I grew up. Dreams don't accommodate as quickly as the tax rolls and the jury rolls do. It seems like a very new place, but it's a place that has sustained me with great pleasure, great happiness all these years. I want to thank, of course, Leon for making it such a grand school. He's a great man, one of the few I've known, a man of great vision and particularity and fussiness and meanness and grandeur and all the things that go to be a great person. He has made this place worth being at. When I first came here 50 years ago, the students were sensational, but the faculty wasn't much, and there was not much of a focus, and I wasn't very welcomed here, except by the students. So I lived by the students for the first few years, and gradually the school got better and better and better and better. But the students kept getting better and better and better too. So I have had the great pleasure over these years. Unaccountably, I'm still here. Unaccountably, they let me go on teaching. Unaccountably, they let me do what I want, pretty much. And that want is making, my secret agenda is to make everybody a poet. That's the whole agenda. There's nothing fancier than that. They don't even have to be bad poets. They could even be good poets. They could even be great poets, and I would let them get away with it. And we have a few people here right now, no names, who you will hear of and hear from for a long time. I mean, students. Very happy you could hear from Anne. Anne is just one of more than a dozen wonderful writers who live and work and teach at Bard, and that's one reason I'm so happy. I belong to the best program, the best department at the college. Everybody respects each other, everybody loves each other. That's rather wonderful and very strange in academia, in case you don't know it. I mean, every now and again we say, well, I didn't really like that pork roast she served the other night. But beyond that, there's not much in the way of criticism. We know each other, we know what we do, we like each other. I have great gratitude to Michelle Dominy, the dean who has made this particular event possible. Many great things have happened to me here. I have found my religion, and I have found 20 years ago my wonderful wife Charlotte, who has given me the best 20 years of my life so far, and I have great gratitude for this as a place where we met. And on this shale underneath us and the curious colors on the pedological map of Dutchess County, you can practically trace the lineaments of my pleasure over the years. It's been a wonderful place, a place full of energy, and when I feel mystical and occult-ish, which I do sometimes, not all the time, because I'm as rational as a subway token in a certain way. Back in the days when we still had them, before you had to be magnetized. When I feel occultish, I realize that this is a fantastic area, geomagically, geomagnetically, geocentrically, anthropocentrically, anthroposophically. It's an extraordinary area of energy. I know that the first year I came, when, even though I worked harder than I had ever worked in my lazy life, that first year at Bard, I wrote more in that year than I had written in my whole life before it, because there's energy here, energy waiting, so I'd say. But I want to thank you all, and I want to thank the place for being what it is, the people who made it what they are, my friends, the friends in the 7 cities of the plains, you know, New Paltz and Woodstock and Tivoli and Rhinebeck and Red Hook, etc. The realms around us, all of whom good. Now, I would like to read, they gave you programs, and there are programs in it from each decade of my being at Bard. That was as far as I would go towards this 50 business myself. So I'll read some of those if I may. Starting with a poem I wrote just in 1960, just as I came here, and then it was published just before I got here, from my first book called On Descent. I think I read this because it's the first book, but also the first poem that was ever mentioned in a review. When the book was reviewed, they picked up this poem to talk about. I can't remember what they said about it, but they mentioned it. So. Here and now she becomes alive, a roar of things out of the streets, for the first time covered with skin, moving for the first time with a train of waters. Here, this body is me. And this is why corners are bent, and this is the tunnel of the violent approaches, being out in the open without terror, being out in the parklands hunting for meat, being Atlantis unresurrected and carelessly swimming, being navies and heavily armed convoys, being decked out with banners, being sudden in an animal, being dark, being stone steps, being broken on the steps, being thirsty and savage on the steps, being steps and an entrance to a living house, to be rain and twisting animal in a full skin, long hair, hands trembling, legs peaceful in bed, her mad woman's hair and the air it floats on. From the next decade, this long piece, which is a section of section 9 from it's called Sonata in A flat. That's Beethoven's Sonata in A flat, the 110. The essay on form. This is from a long poem of mine called The Loom, which was written in the mid-70s. So I'll just read a little of this. It's too long to read now. To listen when it does not speak. To determine the exact distance between any word and any other, and by skill to map the landscape between. Then coax the word to speak, melody, especially when it grieves, aioso dolente, takes your hand, leads you, willing or unwilling, to the pine-lit wedding chamber. You are married to the fact of it. The light goes out on all you felt or failed to feel. Grief is the distance between loves, sometimes stepwise, sometimes reversing its course. As when we move close, and grief is the cave our present joy lights up. Go slow. Grief is distance. Even the miles we've traveled to be together ache under us. Just this once, not to be caught in statement or story, but to flow justly over the contours of your body in the liberty of light. The 1980s were a strange time for me. The next decade. Early on, I went to India for a while and had the kinds of experiences that people in the 70s and 80s went to India to have. But I had one experience there that was extraordinary to me, and that is I was silenced. Language has always been my safeguard, my homeland, my crib, my cradle, my safe house. And then it stopped being that there. Because of course I couldn't speak Nepali or Newari or Tibetan or Hindi or Bengali, the languages of the street. And that was very interesting. But as I found myself isolated in myself as far as language went, I realized too that I was isolated from almost everything I had ever read. And I sat there one day in the cemetery in the Darjeeling, the burying ground, smoking, sitting there, smoke going up, mist coming down, monsoon season, everything very beautiful and green. And I tried to think of all the stuff of my life that I had, all my writings, all the writings I had read, everything I knew, my Kultur I knew. And all I could hold on to, curiously, was Shakespeare and Melville. Very strange. Everything else sort of shimmered away. Even Proust shimmered away. And if you could suddenly be without Proust, you're in a strange landscape. And there I was. So that changed a lot for me. When I came home, I didn't write anything for the next 6 months. For me, that's extraordinary, except little tiny poems. None longer than 4 or 5 lines. And I was trying to reorient myself. A little later, I got back to life, but in my normal way. This is from the later 1980s, the Cloudherd song. Never having done anything ever but watch, and never having actually watched anything, never having attended to anything but cloud, and never having touched one, or learned its numbers or colors or rightful names, except once on the slopes above Darjeeling, I woke out into the morning and breathed you in, mother of atmosphere, green air, eternity, vagrant, the monsoon has brought you, and I took you entirely in. I call you cloud, and call myself yours. In the 90s, many things had happened to me at the end of the 80s and changed everything. Ariadne was the first book I wrote in the 90s that addressed my new life with Charlotte, my wife, when everything changed. So much for the better. And this was an attempt to orient myself in that new life. Dear Ariadne, the image of Ariadne haunts me in the Greek myth, because she, unlike foolish Marpessa, chose the god. The god came and said, I will take you, and she said, yes, you will, I will go with you. She accepted the divine moment. And I thought that was wonderful. I thought that's wonderful about it. That mysterious Cretan lady whose name probably means, I don't know what it means, the lioness of God or something. It's clearly not a Greek name. Dear Ariadne, the womb is full. Black tufts of autumn corn sag under the weight of their damp silk. It springs up as my foot settles, down, in, everywhere, grassy mud. Womb, happening hour, speak my baby for me, I mean my body. This piece of farmer, meek, silent laughter, sneak money, hum, drum, valor of the day sluice clean, hum of sun in the corn stall, hum of wind and stubble, some of yearnings, touch, touch. Christ hears you from the dead, valve of Easter, lich gate of the tomb, broken barrier, bound over boundary, steep deciding, comes to town. Do you hear all the things I'm trying not to say? Never is it sumptuous music, isn't it? More like Bruckner than Brahms. Bring me a glass of water, pour it in my lap. Say, here I reverse the aton and the ion, both at once. Here I transverse the ancient flow, water of spine, water of life, cold by conjure, swear by. I baptize thee stainless, woman. So saying, look me home into the paradise we keep for each other, lately, meet in each our faces. Then from the first decade of our present millennium, remember when millennium was a classy word? We haven't done that yet. We've consented ourselves to the next 1,000 years, we're not worried about it. I have paid my dues in the Church of Madness, huddled in the last pew under the crimson window whose martyred saints, Sebastian, Andrew, Bartholomew, bled their light all over me until I choked on my own desires. I knelt down sometimes too and prayed for everything I wanted, and prayed to be free of wanting and free of me, and all the books were dusty and all the words in them were dust, and dust was the music in my hymnal. I sang still loud as I can, cracked voice lifted in an empty nave.